Like right now, I'm 46. My fiance is 44. I don't have children. And I tell him all the time, if we met 10 years ago, we would have like a house full of kids. And you end up wasting the best years of your life, chasing a dream. And that's what my fear is for a lot of these women. And what I did, I tell John, his name is Giacomo, and I tell him all the time, like, if we met 10 years ago, we'd have like a bunch of kids, but your body can only do what it can do for as long as it can do it. And we end up wasting time chasing kind of this, I call it like the Black rom-com kind of, Morris Chestnut thing. And, there are men out there and there are women to get it. But, after like a couple years and you aren't on that path, to me, it's like, all right,
Welcome to Flourish in the Foreign, an award-winning podcast that celebrates, elevates, and affirms the voices and stories of Black women living and thriving abroad, while exploring living abroad as a pathway to wellness. I'm your host, Christine Job, a Black American woman with Trinidadian roots, podcaster, business strategist, and entrepreneur based in Valencia, Spain. Hey everyone, welcome to Flourish in the Foreign. I'm Christine, your host. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate y'all. For those of you who are not on the Flourish in the Foreign newsletter, you're missing out. You know why? Because I've announced that I am running the only live version of the Move Abroad with Intention course this year. And it kicks off on Saturday, August 5th. And also, it is currently 50% off. 50. Now, y'all would have known this if you're part of the email list because they've been knowing about it for maybe a week, perhaps. But those of you on the podcast who listen, I appreciate you. You need to go ahead and sign up for the newsletter, okay? You can take 50% off not only the live course, but the self-study course by using the code SUMMER50, okay? For those of you that don't know about the Move Abroad with Intention course, it is a 5-week course. And we go through everything that you need to not only move abroad, but to thrive abroad. The course is really centered on sustainability and longevity, and to be able to use this move as a springboard into a life well lived. So in the course, we go from visioning and really getting clear about what you're wanting and expecting from this next chapter of your life to jobs, work, employment, professional sustainability. Then we go into money management. We also talk about what to take and what not to take, girl, because you don't need to take everything. Promise you. But there are some things you should be taking, 100%. And then we talk about settling in, because as I've said so many times on this podcast, it is not about changing location. Your life will not magically become amazing just because you are setting down roots somewhere else. No. It is a cultivation. So I'm going to give you some tips about how to cultivate community, which I do know something about. I've lived abroad now for 6 years in Spain, and I have a thriving and robust community that I sometimes talk about on LinkedIn. Oddly enough, I say that proudly as an introvert, that I have the community that I wanted. So that's really important. And then, of course, we talk about not only long-term stay, but what you need to do if you decide to repatriate. And then I'm throwing in a bonus week all about building a business abroad. Yes, so if you are interested in chatting with me for 5 weeks live, and everybody else in the cohort, about your move abroad strategy, about your live abroad strategy, about your thrive abroad strategy, this is the time to sign up, 50% off. Use the code SUMMER50, and I hope to see you there. All right, on to the next episode. Season 4, episode 19. Today's episode was the third and final live dating abroad discussion. This episode was not a panel. It just featured the lovely Latrese Williams, who is now Latrese Canas because she is a married woman. You may remember Latrese because she is a past podcast guest. Season 1, episode 41. Also, she is such a popular guest, particularly because she was also featured in our Dating Abroad compilations, and she gave such good advice that people really, really resonated with. So in today's episode, I'm going to be really discussing some of the philosophies and strategies that Latrese shared in her episode, but also what has made her successful in dating. She's based in Italy, so she's had quite a lot of success there. Obviously, she was dating, partnered, engaged, and now married. So if going abroad and being in a long-term relationship, being married is really important to you, I highly suggest you listen to this episode, take some notes, because Latrese has some theories on how to go where you are celebrated so you have a better chance of being partnered, if that's important to you. Now, you can watch this episode on the YouTube channel, Flourish on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you're subscribed and the notifications are put on. Once we get to 1,000 subscribers, perhaps I will bring back our live panel discussions. Maybe we're talking about dating abroad, maybe we're talking about something else. Who knows? It is up to you. We will see. All right. Without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Latrese.
Today, we have our third discussion in a series of dating abroad panels. And if you have not had the opportunity to listen to Dating Abroad Part 1 and Dating Abroad Part 2, you should go ahead and do so. The links to those episodes are actually in the description of this live discussion. Today, we have, I think, probably the most anticipated guest, of this entire series. If you have been listening to the podcast, you know our guest Latrese, who had a fantastic episode when she talked about her journey to moving to Rome and thriving in Rome, Italy. But also, I think she even became even more of a standout when I did the Dating Abroad compilations, because I know that I got a lot of great feedback about, in particular, not only her experience dating abroad, but her advice and her philosophy for all of you Black women who are maybe watching this about how to do so with some strategy and some kind of interesting, I think, insights on it. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to bring our guest on. If you have any questions or any kind of comments, or you want to share your dating abroad journeys and stories or whatever, you can always do that by putting your comments in the comment box and we will get to it. I'm going to kick us off with some questions, but let me first bring our guest. Here we are.
Hi.
Latrese, how are you?
Good. Good morning. Well, I'm in Chicago right now, so good morning.
Oh, you're in Chicago. Okay, so
Yeah.
yes, it is good morning. Normally, we'd be on the same time zone because Rome and Spain, we share the same time zone here in Central Europe. Okay, so first things first, how are you, Latrese?
I'm good. I'm really good.
Awesome.
Considering, this is a really odd time of life still, like we're in that panini still, so.
I know. It's so strange, like trying to get back to living and thriving and traveling, and it's still being very much a pandemic out here. But let's get to it. Let's first start with, if you could, Latrese, maybe introduce yourself briefly to maybe people who haven't listened to your episode of the podcast. Let us know who you are.
Okay. Well, my name is Latrese Williams. I am from Chicago originally. I'm actually back home for a bit with my fiance, and we're going to head back to Rome in a couple weeks. So I work in real estate sales and acquisitions. I've been doing that for different entities off and on for forever. So I work remotely, which is, I guess, kind of like the the holy grail of moving abroad. So it has really freed me to be able to kind of live as authentically as I mean, it gives me a lot of freedom, financially, and then also in terms of geography. So I'm doing that right now. And I just got engaged to an Italian Roman fiance now. It sounds so weird still to say that because it's still like, oh yeah, this guy.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I have to do this. Like, oh, where's the camera?
Where's the camera?
Trying to show the ring. Yes, here's the ring.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. I love it. So that's why people want to come to you, Latrese, because you got the ring. And let's be
fiance, right? We're the same.
That's cool. Let's get into it. A lot of people, dating abroad, as I said before, the dating abroad compilations of my podcast are two of the most popular episodes. And they're definitely the episodes I get probably the most consistent feedback. Like people keep on messaging me about dating abroad. So
one of the things that I noticed, I'm from Chicago. I went to Clark in Atlanta. I did all the Black stuff, National Black MBA and the Urban League, the Metro Board. I went to all the events when the Kappas would throw something, when the AKAs would throw something. And I was just never able to really find and connect with someone that really wanted to authentically love me, and then that I felt the same about. And that doesn't mean you can't find somebody in those settings, but it's incredibly challenging. To me, and other women, and I'm all for the laws of attraction because you have to, say what you want. But at the same time, I think the laws of attraction have to be rooted in reality. And when I would do a lot of those events just out and about in, Black America, Black professional America, I didn't get a lot of traction. A lot of men I'm not their type. I'm dark skinned, I'm tall, I don't have a big butt. It just is what it is. I'm not the flavor. And I'm okay with that. I think one of the things that happened once I moved abroad and started dating other men and found myself in a space where I was very desirable was I let go of a lot of bitterness. I still see a lot of African American carry this, and I think sometimes that'll manifest in online comments when a Black man marries a woman outside of his race. Then women sometimes will get well, why is he with her? And to me, I'm like, you know what? If I knew you, I would come to your wedding and throw rice and give you flowers because I'm happy that you found love, but I don't see myself as competition. I think for those types of, when a man chooses to do that, it's fine. I want everyone to be happy. So, but it just became lighter for me because I felt like, well, I'm happy. So why am I worried about somebody else finding their happiness too? And I think there's a freedom that comes with, having the ability to spend time romantically with, almost anybody you would want to. And you don't carry that burden of loneliness. And what I saw with a lot of what my experience was, and with a lot of my friends still in the US, everyone was single. It didn't matter. I have friends who were partners at law firms and doctors, and they hit every professional milestone. Bank account just buckets of money in the bank, and they might have had their child already, or didn't want to have any more kids, or didn't want to have kids, or whatever. They had the property. They had every single box that they checked for themselves in terms of what they felt they wanted to have to be happy, but they were all single. Everyone was single. It was ridiculous how many people, beautiful, quality, intelligent, witty, every positive attribute you could place onto a woman. These women were still single. And it's ridiculous. And the reasons why I think are just, that's not really the topic of this. And I'm not that woman who's like, oh, Black men are horrible. I think Black men are amazing. African-American men are spectacular. I just don't think it's enough of them. And I think that, because of all the systemic racism and jail and drug sentencing and, homicide and all these other things, they have their own battles. But I'm here to see Black women thrive. I understand their battles. And, if you want to get in that war with them, knock yourself out. But because of all of that, they have so many options. And you really, they don't have to settle in any way that they don't want to. And a lot of them don't, especially if they're professionals. They have any kind of degrees or whatever. And that's fine. So to me, it's well, why would you continue to stay in this space where these men have absolutely no interest in being with you in a real situation? Or would you put yourself in a place where you're more likely to succeed? As my friend says, set yourself up for success. And so, that probably is in Atlanta. I'm like big on Atlanta. I think Atlanta is like the worst place for Black women to move if they want to be single, or even if they're married and they don't want their husband to cheat. There's just too many options there for them. I mean, and I think a lot of the best intentioned men, you got to be very strong and have tunnel vision to not kind of like, it's just beautiful women, beautiful Black accomplished women everywhere. So I don't, DC is a close second.
No, I mean, I agree. I'm from Atlanta, and like, it is a chocolate city. The women are bad, like just on every level. Every level.
If there's balance, that would be fine. If it was like, 100 people in a room and 50 bad Black women and 50 bad Black dudes, and everybody could get together. But it's not. It's like, I went to Clark, and Clark had classes where there were like 30 people in the class and three men. So that was like, and then, you look at the numbers just in the AUC, which is kind of like a microcosm of the city. Mm-hmm. And, almost any room that you're in, if it's any kind of positivity in it, it's going to be way, 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 way more women. I mean, you're talking like, 30 to 1, 25 to 1. And that's just, I mean, like, I don't want that struggle. And I don't know if women who are in that struggle know that they don't want that struggle, because what happens is you waste, like right now I'm 46. My fiance is 44. I don't have children. And I tell him all the time, if we met 10 years ago, we would have like a house full of kids, and you end up wasting the best years of your life, chasing a dream. And that's what my fear is for a lot of these women. And what I did, I tell John, his name is Giacomo, and I tell him all the time, like, if we met 10 years ago, we'd have like a bunch of kids, but your body can only do what it can do for as long as it can do it. And we end up wasting time chasing kind of this, I call it like the Black rom-com kind of, Morris Chestnut thing. And, there are men out there and there are women to get it. But, after like a couple years and you aren't on that path, to me, it's like, all right, the dudes at the Sunday service and the choir and stuff, they're still single because they're checking for each other. You need to go look for something else. Like, don't join the study group or the Bible study. That's not the place where you're going to find them, because, he's just trying to, see if you got a brother. and that's okay too. Have those friends, have those connections. But, if you're wanting to have someone in your life significantly, and everyone doesn't want that, but if that's what you really want, put yourself in a place to succeed. And Atlanta is not that place.
Yes. Okay. So there's so many things I want to talk to you about, because Latrese also, for those of you guys that don't know, she has a really amazing Facebook group. I think it's still called Sistas Who Travel and Date.
Yeah, it's a private group, just because, I mean, if anyone's interested in it, send me a message and I'll definitely add you. But it's a private group just because women talk about very sensitive things and they don't want like the world to know that they talk about them. But yeah, absolutely.
I'm a member of that group. I love, one, it's like hilarious. And I also love like the camaraderie. Everyone is normally very supportive and engaged. But what I also think is fascinating, being that, I've been abroad for about 5 years now, some of the conversations about dating and like the normal stuff that's supposed to be happening in dating, particularly in the United States, sometimes just blow me away. Like some of this like dating culture that has been normalized by, like, you see in the shade room, people are like, well, that's just how it is. And I'm like, that's not how it is. That's not how it is everywhere.
Just because something is normalized doesn't mean it's normal. I mean, slavery was normal at one point, or normalized, but it's not normal. People should not be enslaved. I think we've kind of made that agreement. And I think that a lot of the stuff has just been normalized within the United States broadly too, because there are things that women of other cultures are struggling with too.
Yeah.
But the only difference, or the big difference, is they have so many more options. As a Black woman, you're already seen as less desirable by a lot of people in the United States. And that just is what it is. There's been studies from, like, I think Match.com did one where they were saying that Black women were the least likely to be engaged online, and Black women and Korean and Asian men. So other women deal with this stuff too, but they can just be like, okay, next. And when you date abroad, it's the same thing. It's like, men are men. I don't care where you are. If they ever find life on another planet and they're men and women, they're going to act the same. I promise you. That's not the thing. The thing is, when you are in a space to continue to meet people that, okay, you understand. Like, I felt when I moved abroad that it was like I was 17 dating, because so many things I hadn't really learned about myself or relationships being in the US, just because I hadn't had enough experience with it, that I was able to kind of grow with those experiences and grow and learn and discover what was good and what wasn't good for me and for my spirit. But that experience had never really happened in the United States, because I just hadn't gotten the volume of relationships and interactions with men to kind of glean that information. So it's a very, very different situation.
Definitely. And I think that the only reason why I bring that up is that sometimes I think, similar to like just moving abroad in general, people they bring themselves, but they bring the same beliefs. They bring the same kind of way of moving and being abroad. And they complain because they're not getting the results that they think that they want. And I find it's very similar. Like, people will be like, I want to leave the US, but they basically are looking for like another Atlanta minus racism or whatever obstacles somewhere else. It's like, it doesn't work like that. And with dating, it doesn't work like that. And I find like sometimes Black women are looking for Black American men abroad. And I'm like, and unless you're finding and guess what? In this new season of the podcast, I actually have a guest who's exclusively dated Black American men abroad. Fascinating how she's done it. She didn't necessarily go set out to do it.
That's so limiting. Well, to me, like my belief with that is like, like you eat the food. Like, if you're gonna eat the food, date the man. Like, why would you go to like a whole other country to eat at McDonald's every single day? Like, you can't eat McDonald's sometimes. I went out with a Black dude from the Caribbean in Italy, which isn't quite the States, but it's adjacent. Like, I'm not saying don't do that, but to only limit yourself to that is just, to me, silly. And honestly, I don't know what this woman's experience is, but generally when Black men are abroad, they're not looking for us. Like, they could have met.
That's true.
Look, if a Black dude is 30 years old and he grew up in DC or he grew up in Detroit and he went to Howard, he has had a billion chances, especially if he's anywhere near attractive and anywhere near accomplished. He's had a billion chances to get a Black woman just like you, or better. And if he hasn't picked one by now, he's probably not looking for you today. That's my belief. So, I think that's just I think it's limiting, and it's setting yourself up for disappointment. And, I would never recommend that. I don't think you should only date Black men. I mean, if you're if you move to Kenya, that's just who you're going to come across. And there are so many Kenyan men that are African that you can only date Black men and be fine. But if you move to Thailand and you decide that you're only going to date Black American men, well, first of all, it's very, 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 very few of them. And then secondly, they're not there for you. They're just like, I have this group, and I think my group is pretty mild. When you look at some of the men's groups, and a lot of them, I don't think Black women get caught up in. Black women tend to defend Black men a lot. Mm-hmm. Black American men, Black African men to an extent too, but they're not gonna. I don't think we're quick to be like, oh, I don't date. My dating life sucks because Black men or whatever. We don't do that. In a lot of the groups with the Black men, they'll tell you all the reasons that they don't like Black American women and why they want to go find a Filipino girl or whatever the thing is they feel like is going to bring them joy. So if you go, especially Asia and South America, those men are going there for those women. They are not going there for you. Now, if you happen to be like in the military or something, and he's in the military, and you're both like, you meet a Black dude from Arkansas and you vibe, that's wonderful. It's beautiful. But if he specifically chose to move to like Colombia, he did not move there to meet a black girl from like Jackson, Mississippi. He could have met a black girl from Jackson, Mississippi 20 years ago. So yeah, people should do what makes them happy, but I wouldn't recommend that philosophy. It's very limiting.
It is so limiting. And actually, I've spoken to a couple of Black women who are in Colombia, and they're like, no, the Black men are not checking for.
They're only something else.
Exactly.
I'm not knocking that. I think one of the most beautiful things in life is when people know what they want. And when a man says to you, I know exactly what I want, and it is not you, that's freeing. Okay, go get that. Let me step out your way so you can go get what you want. What is problematic is when these dudes can't admit what they want, and then they drag a woman into their uncertainty. Don't let somebody play with your time like that. If he's clear that he's wanting something else, then let him go get it. And I think that was kind of one of the things that was so freeing to me. I'm like, whatever other men are interested in, if they're not interested in me, I don't take it personal. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I'm not everyone's, cup of coffee, cup of water, whatever. Go get what you want. Let me go focus on the people who are interested in me and who would like to spend time with me and build a relationship with me, because that other stuff is a waste of my time. And I'm telling you, it's like there are very few things in this life, I think, that are truly finite, and time is the thing. You're not going to be young forever. You're not going to be beautiful or energetic or healthy forever. And you have to take advantage of those years and of that time and spend that finding and being with someone that's going to help you grow and you help them grow. A real true relationship, if that's what you want, a real true relationship. And, dating in Los Angeles for 20 years is not going to get you there. It's just not.
I've heard horrible things about dating in LA. I've heard horrible things about it.
Beautiful, like 6'3", models that are like blonde and blue eyes have horrible dating stories in Los Angeles. If you're just a regular sister from like Connecticut, you're gonna struggle.
So this is what I want to get to now, because just like living abroad, I tell people you need to move abroad with intention. You need to have an idea. I tell people all the time, don't get fixated on a place, because then especially if you go on vacation, because vacationing someplace is completely different than actually living in a place.
Yeah, sure.
And you need to find a place that's actually going to support you thriving. And so Paris might be super lovely and you may visit all the time, but it may not actually be the place that's conducive for your happiness. In the same vein, you got to be honest. If partnering in the next year, 3 years or whatever is super important to you, then you need to allow that and what that looks like to you to lead the way for your destination. Again, it may not be Paris. It may not be a place you necessarily consider, but it might be a place that you actually thrive. So go ahead.
Well, I've posted this in like kind of Black Sit or some of the groups where people are looking at moving abroad. And, they're always like, well, what's cheap and what's the weather? And, and those are fair things to be concerned about, of course.
But come on.
You want to know, like, can you, financially afford to be there? But I'm always like, are you single? Are you looking to date? And who are you? Because most Black men, they're not really checking for Europe. European women aren't as interested in them. I mean, they're interested in them, but they're not like, they're going to struggle with them the same way they would have with the American woman, because the income disparity isn't there. And it just is what it is. When when Black American men move to a lot of places in South America or Southeast Asia, the economies are really bad. Between that and kind of the global image of African American men and the stereotypes that are associated with them, they do really well in those environments. They have really beautiful women that are absolutely interested in them and committed and dedicated and blah, blah, blah. And to me, that's fine. That's what they are looking for. So when you see a Black man comment and he says, man, I love, Bogota. Okay. I'm telling you, you're not going to like Bogota like he likes Bogota. His experience there is different. For Black women, I think some of the best places for us to be if you're looking to date is definitely most of the countries in Europe. The history of racism in the United States has really made African American women seem like we're not desirable. And even I think that is changing a little bit more. And, you see it in media, you see it in younger relationships. But historically, clearly they've been attracted to us or there would be no light-skinned people in America. So like a whole lot of Black women were raped at some point to make all these light-skinned people. So the attraction, whatever depravity it was wrapped in, has been there. But, you know, to actually get a man of a different race, or even a lot of Black men, you know, they're hung up on kind of, you know, shade and stuff like that. And being dark skinned, I mean, it just is what it is. A lot fewer Black men were interested in me. You know, they were just like, wow, you know, you're interesting, you're cool, but, you know, I want my kids to pass the paper bag test. So you're not the woman to help them do that. And, you know, and that's fair. But then when you step outside the United States, and I think specifically for Europe, and I'm making a sweeping generalization because every country in Europe is different. But for the most part, they don't have the history. So there's absolutely racism all over the world. And you go to Africa, it's colorism, and then it's classism. So there's always some separation. There's not this utopic place where everyone's just like singing kumbaya and no one's disparaging somebody else for something beyond their character. It just does not exist. People need to get that out of their head. It's like, but I think it's degrees of racism. And the racism in the United States is institutionalized. It's in, you know, it's in housing, it's in employment law, it's in, you know, education, it's in all of these things. But in Europe, it's not that. I think Europeans were just like, oh, we love Black people. There were never enough Black people in those countries to make their disenfranchisement law. And so because of that, you know, there's nothing that's systemically holding you from this, that, or the third. Not that, you know, there are Africans, people of African descent will totally be like, I hate Europe because, you know, that I get treated badly. But when you're African American, even people will see me and think I'm Nigerian, and I open my mouth and they're like, oh, you're from the States. And they'll completely change. It's like a switch. They're like, oh, you're American, you know, you're cool. But it's a kind of different vibe. And putting yourself into that situation, I think as a Black woman, sets you up for more success, because you don't have those institutional barriers. And then people don't have as many of, I think, the preconceived notions that people in the US have about Black Americans. So we could just not that they're just like loving Black folk. It just was not a part of their learnings. And so I think when a man sees you in most of the countries in Europe, he's like, I want a beautiful woman. Or I want, you know, a brilliant woman, or I want a really tall woman. And I think they're more likely to put your race as like, you know, like when in the States, how white people be like, well, she's a brunette or she's a blonde. Like for them, it's more like, oh, well, she's Black, she's, you know, Asian, she's, you know, she's from here. And they clearly see the otherness, but it's not a thing where they're like, oh, she's the other, I can't, you know, really have a serious relationship with her. And I think that's the difference. So I think Europe is probably one of the better places. And the other part is, you know, I know when women are always concerned about meeting men in countries in Africa, about them just wanting a green card and that kind of thing. And I mean, they're brilliant men, and, you know, men who only want to love you for you, that are in different countries in Africa. But the challenge, I think, is you need to be where you could live, because then he's not trying to move to the States. Like, even though we're visiting now, when I mentioned to my fiance, like, you know, would you want to spend more time in the US? And he's like, no. No, thank you. And, you know, you really want to be with somebody who doesn't need or want to live in the US, if you want to kind of get around that, like, fear of 90-day fiance. And most of the people in Europe, their passport is fine. You know, they can go anywhere they want to. They don't need you to if they want to go to the States, or if they want to go to Australia or Canada, they don't need you. They could do that on their own. And if you know, in a lot of the African countries, I know, like in Ghana, at the airport, they check your passport like 25 times, and you can't get a visa to go anywhere. You know, you're kind of just stuck in those places. And so there is a definite incentive to find a woman to marry, to kind of take you beyond those limitations. So it is what it is. It's there. And it's something you have to be leery of. But Africa full of Black men. That's like if that's your thing. But I think the trick too. So people, you know, in the United States, it really did a number on us when it comes to race, because we're like, oh, well, we're all Black. But that's not how everyone, and you get to different countries in Africa, they're like, no, I'm Ghanaian, I'm Nigerian, I'm Kenyan, I'm Eritrean. You're American. You know, we're completely different. And then if you want to date them, like if you want to date a doctor, He's like, well, no, if I'm a doctor in Kenya, I'm supposed to marry a woman of a certain class that's Kenyan. So they're not really, there are always exceptions, but I think a lot of women are misguided thinking that, because we have this, I think, because America's treated us so badly, we have this kind of fantasy of being welcomed back into Africa, into the motherland. And, and there are definitely people who embrace us. I'm not saying that they don't, but you're still, you're just as much of an other in most of the countries in Africa as you are in Europe, So I don't want folks to get that twisted.
That's
so
true.
If you meet a man there and he's of a higher or similar class, he's probably, having family expectations to stay within his country. Like if he's Nigerian, he's not expected to marry a woman from Rwanda. He's expected to marry a woman from Nigeria if he's of a certain class. So, you kind of got to understand, I think, how all of that plays together, because the United States has us just thinking about race. In other parts of the world, they don't see it necessarily the same way. But on the flip side, I have a friend in Rome who was dating a Black woman her parents are from the Congo, but she was raised in Rome. She looks like me, like she's a very similar look. And so I'm like, oh, so she's from the Congo. He's like, no, she's Italian. And I'm like, but she wear weaves and stuff. He's like, no, she's Italian. I mean, he's like, no, she's not just Italian. She's Roman, because, she has a Roman accent. And for him, it's the race is there. He's not blind, but culturally, she's Italian. Her language is Roman. And so you won't hear that in America so much, and I'll tell my boyfriend or my fiance, I'll tell him that, even though he speaks English well, but he has a really strong accent, people are going to embrace him before they're going to embrace me because he's white. Even though my ancestors been here for centuries, and I'm American and I went to school here and everything. But as a European, people see him, another white American will see him as more of deserving of Americanness than me. And I don't see that in Europe as much. It's more like, well, if he's, I know I can't speak for every country, but they're like, if you're born in Germany and, even wherever your parents are from, you're German, and we don't do that so much here. So.
Interesting. I think your points about culture is so, so important. I think people, again, kind of fling themselves abroad and they think about, is it sunny? Does it have a beach? Is it cheap? Whatever that means. And look, people, the UK has beaches. Okay. And they sometimes have sun. You know what I mean? Like a lot of places have beaches and the sun shines. Is it warm? Is it hot? All these other things. Scandinavia, they have beaches.
Yeah.
It's really about going deeper and being honest. And I think a lot of people don't want to do that work, because to actually go deeper is to also recognize that, we are also part of the issue of maybe preventing our own happiness. Because I think that through conditioning and through whatever, maybe even life experiences, we all have baggage that prevents us from maybe experiencing what we're looking for, or even being able to open our eyes to what we truly need and what we really want, and go past like surface level things. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think that's I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I think that's a fair kind of assessment, but I think what it is that, I think, everyone in America sold this kind of dream of what your life is to be. And I think African-American women are kind of sold this whole, like, growing up, and I saw the Cosby Show, and you see like that there's this fantasy of living, not fantasy. I mean, they're clearly Black doctors and lawyers living in brownstones in Harlem. That's not the fantasy part, but that you're supposed to want that kind of nuclear, well-to-do experience. And then the reality is Bill Cosby wasn't Dr. Huxtable. We're wanting this thing that isn't necessarily rooted in, it's not always the perfect way, the best way that happiness is going to show up for each of us. And because we're kind of taught that, like one of the things I'm just like is I just tell women, just be open, just date everybody. Hey, date the dude who deliver the boxes at UPS, date the doctor, date the lawyer, date the dude with 3 kids, date everybody you thought you could never find happiness with, because it could show up anywhere. Love can show up anywhere. But I think because of like that, when you were talking about like being afraid to step outside of that, I think that fear comes from the fact that is a differentiation from the narrative that we're fed as we're kind of growing up in this country. So anytime something is like is other, then it's like, well, no, I don't know if that's what I'm supposed to, is it okay to even want this? Like, is it okay to like this? Because this isn't what people told me I should want. This is what my parents are Black, my uncles, my aunts, everybody, everyone's American. This is supposed to be the best country in the world. and my fiance is terrified of getting shot. Can I tell you that? Europeans are terrified of getting shot in the United States. They think that it's like the Wild West. I mean, and people do get killed, but that is not a reality, in most parts of the world. So we're fed this kind of narrative of this being the perfect, best place, and that we'll just, meet some guy that is going to be like Dr. Huxtable. But then, you really have to be like, okay, Dr. Huxtable is not Dr. Huxtable. Bill Cosby is horrible. So sometimes it's just a fantasy. And the story is fine, but understand that isn't always a true story. That sometimes the stories we were fed are fiction, and that we need to want something beyond that. And we can't be afraid to do that, because again, we will waste time. And the worst thing in the world is to live a life unfulfilled and be on your deathbed at 70 or 80 or 90 or 100 and have all this regret. Like, man, I had this chance. And people tell you stuff like that all the time. Man, I had this, like going to Clark, people would tell me, oh man, I could have went to Howard, but and I'm like, well, okay, and that's fine. I'm fine with my decisions. Are you okay with yours? And that's the thing, they're not. They're like, well, I regret not doing that. And you don't want to regret those things. You want to do the things. And Philly ain't going nowhere. Philly is going to be there. If you move to London or Paris or Amsterdam for 3 months and you hate it, get your butt back on the airplane and go back to Philly. It will not, it will still, you can still get a cheesesteak. You can do all the things, ring the Liberty Bell, whatever you feel like you need to do. But if you don't take those chances and ask yourself those questions while you have an opportunity to, I think most women will regret it later on in life.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Flourish in the Foreign. And if you are, be sure to support this podcast by going to buymeacoffee.com/flourishforeign and buying me a coffee. You can also write a review of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, and anywhere else you listen to the show. Thank you so much for listening and supporting. Now, back to the episode.
Definitely. Okay, I want to, welcome everyone who has joined us. We're talking about dating abroad. I have my lovely, lovely guest, which you guys know, Latrese, from her episode when she's talking about moving to Rome and how she made that happen, but also from the Dating Abroad compilation. Her segment of the compilation is probably one of the most popular segments of the compilation. That's one that everybody was like, who is she? Someone asked me for your email, and I was like, I'm not giving you her email. This is the stuff I'm allowed to give, which is like her IG handle. Y'all handle it from there. I'm not giving you her email. Don't do that.
Message on IG is fine.
Exactly. Okay, I'm going to get to these comments. And if you have any questions about dating abroad, or if you want to share your experiences dating abroad, please put them in the comments here. And let's see. First, we have Indigo Archer says, congratulations, because Latrese is newly engaged. I love it. I love it. Yes. Oh, wait, let me hide it. Go ahead. Do it again. Show them the ring. Show them. Yes. We love that. We love that. Indigo Archer says, tell the truth, sis. I live abroad and have traveled abroad too. Tell us, where are you, Indigo Archer? And when I see Black men, they are not looking for Black women. That is so true. And also, I would say take it even a step further, I think depending on obviously which country you're in, which city you're in, like Black women, we crave community. So we're going to look for each other and we'll be like, hey, we should do brunch. Hey, we should do something like or at least let's know each other. I don't usually see a lot of Black men doing that. So
I think the couple things in the Asian communities, you see, I think the Black American, all the expats in Asian communities are more cohesive. I think because they're all exterior to the culture within that country because of the language barriers and other stuff. So if you move to Japan or you move to China, the language is so hard and the culture is so different that like you only find yourself in this expat bubble. And so it's like this different kind of experience. What I've seen in Europe, specifically in Italy, is the language is a little, better to grasp. And so most of the people that have been there, I'd say my Italian is like at an intermediate level. It's not horrible. It's not great. But I mean, there are definitely African-American women and other expat women that are fluent, they're fine. So I think we integrate more into the culture within Italy. So like right now we live, my fiance's parents have 3 apartments in the building we live in. And so they have 1 apartment, we live under them, and then we live across the hall from his sister. And so it's kind of like this communal, like generational thing. We share like a terrace in our outdoor space. And so like yesterday, for instance, he called his mom on Zoom. I'm not on Zoom, whatever. And on a FaceTime. And so I'm talking to her in Italian and she's talking to me so it's a lot more integrated. So in Asia specifically, I think you see the Black people become like their own unit. Like there's like this one big expat unit. And then within that, they're like the Black American things. And the men, I think, get together a little bit more. But they're not there for Black men either. They're not for like the Asian women. And I think you see that a little bit. You see that the most, I think, in Asia. But then in countries in Europe, I think we're a little bit more integrated within those countries. People tend to have jobs. They speak the language a little bit more. They get married. They have kids. They're dealing with in-laws. And it's less of like this extended vacation and more like of this integrated life. But like I knew this gay white couple that lived in China for like 13 years and they speak any Chinese. They didn't really have any Chinese friends. All of their friends are expats. Everything is, expats. And that's just not, you end up doing, a little bit more. And then the other part is like, we definitely in Italy, the Black women get together. We do that. But also, I have more friends that are white once I moved to Europe that aren't necessarily Italian. I have a really good friend from Iceland. She's blonde, blue eyed. Like we would never be friends in the US, but we're really cool. I have a really good friend from Latvia, and you just end up meeting friends from other countries because they're not bringing all this US baggage with them and all these kind of stereotypes of what they think African Americans are. And I found myself meeting and spending more time with white people from the US than I ever did when I was living in the US. And so they're kind of different layers of that, I think. But Asia specifically, you just end up being in like this little expat bubble. It's really hard to integrate into those cultures.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we have another question, comment. And Indigo Archer also just commented. She says this person says they're in Kuwait. She's a Black American woman. Speaking as a Black American woman living abroad, many limit themselves to still looking for the same thing they were looking for at home. I just want to stop apologizing and live our lives. Now that's a word.
But girl, you need to put that on a t-shirt.
But I think the issue is that people don't recognize that they're apologizing. I don't think people recognize or take the time to actually understand what they really want and what they really need, because they're so focused on chasing whatever the American dream is, whatever their Black American dream is. And it's like, do you even really want that? So I love that insight. But I would love for you, Latrese, because on the podcast, you talked about your philosophy on how Black women should be strategic when going abroad. And you said specifically, and I thought, I knew it was going to be provocative when it dropped. I was like, I know people have something to say. But you were like, look, based on how you look, you should maybe be strategic on where you go, because people will embrace you and things like that. And I know people get really touchy but also we all understand like visuals, and we understand people are attracted to certain types of people. And we also understand that what is seen as attractive is dependent on culture. So I don't know why people are touchy about it, but they are touchy about it. That's how it is.
People don't like to accept that. I mean, the fairy tale is like Beauty and the Beast. You know, she meets this guy who kidnaps her and holds her hostage. But even though he's a horrible looking man, because he has a good heart, she falls in love with him. And you know, that's just not the way the world works. You know, in my group, women get pissed if the dude isn't, you know, his penis isn't big enough. They're like, look, you need to go back somewhere with that. And they want a woman to look a certain way. And it's crap to say that they don't. You know, the IG models all look the same because men are into that look right now. It's not, people wouldn't be clicking on their pages watching their stories if they weren't attracted to that. And I think because there's this narrative of like the fairy tale fantasy of that not being important, that people don't want to accept it. But the thing that I do believe this part of the fairy tale is in the eye of the beholder, you know, and, you know, everything isn't for everybody. So kind of once you accept that and understand that, then you go be in that space where you are desirable, you know. And one of the things that you know, I'm dark. I am never going to play well in like the Dominican. I'm never going to play well in Brazil or the US or even the UK, because, you know, the black men that are in those countries are from, you know, West Africa and the Caribbean. So they're still holding a lot of those kind of color struck kind of things. But in Italy, like, you know, I'm ideal, because I think the part of it is that the men there, like, if I want a black woman, I want a black woman. So, like we were walking down the street. I don't know, this was maybe a month ago, and my fiance's best friend's father saw us. And so, I mean, he's an older guy, whatever. And my fiance stops, he talks to him, and he's like, oh, you know, da, da, da. So then I go do something else. But when I come back, he's laughing. And I'm like, why are you laughing? And he was like, man, he asked me, he's like, man, how did you find her? He's like, cause, you know, women like that, like, you gotta be like super rich to get a woman like that. And I'm like, you know, I'm like seen as this, you know, end all be all kind of prize by so many men there. You know, he's just figuring out like what did Giacomo do to get me, you know? And the men that were trying to date me, it's just ridiculous. Like, you know, the guy who was dating Miss Italy was in my inbox. And they're like, I Google him, and it's all these pictures of him and Miss Italy, and you know, they were engaged at one point, their engagement shoot. And I'm like, why is this guy in my inbox? He's sending me DMs. Like, so all these like kinds of, you know, just over the top men were definitely feeling me. Those experiences did not happen in the United States. Like, one of the cast members from Big Brother Rome, I'm in the park with my dog, and he, you know, he's in the park with his dog, and he starts talking to me. He's like, yeah, you know, we should hang out, ask me for my number and stuff. You know, no, like, people like that just never were like trying to check for me in Chicago or in Atlanta or whatever. So the caliber of the men that I was meeting was just ridiculous. And so I was trying to put myself in a room where there were lots of different types of men interested in me. Now, because I'm dark and I have a certain look. Now, if you're a light-skinned black woman and you like, I love black men, go to South Africa, you know, go to Kenya. Black men in Africa like light-skinned women. It's just, you know, that's their thing. You do, you know, if you are heavy set, South Africa is a really good place. West Africa is a good place. You know, men there like really heavier women. If you're really, you know, a really thin woman, Europe is better. So I think, and then if you're a black man, you know, definitely South America and South Asia. And it just depends on, you know, where you can live. Don't go someplace. I have a friend now who, like, her husband is in a country he wants to leave and come to the States. And he lives in a place she wouldn't want to live. So don't meet somebody in a place you don't want to live. Because if you can, like, you know, and the other part too, women in Europe get caught up with this too. If you have a child, like, this is like one of the biggest problems I think I see. If you have a child with a man and the relationship ends, you can't leave and take your child. You can leave, but your child is a citizen of that country. Yeah. And her father has a right to keep him. So in a lot of the expat groups, you'll see a lot of women of different races where they're like, I'm still in, the Netherlands or Spain or France or wherever. And I've been, I wanted to leave 10 years ago, but my son, I can't leave my son. And so you'll see that a lot. So definitely make sure it's a place you can see yourself staying, particularly if you end up, having a relationship and having a child with somebody. So,
I mean, that is excellent advice. And I mean,
don't get caught up, because then these women are mad because they'll be like, the kid is like 12 and they wanted to leave 10 years ago and they're still there. And one girl I know that she's in France, and she's a white American girl from Kentucky, and she's a white American girl from Kentucky, and she's in France, and her son is like 13 now, and she's like, I wanted to move when the relationship ended, but he was like, and she said at first he was like, okay, bye, go. But then his parents were like, well, that's our only grandchild. You can't let her take our only grandchild. And so he wouldn't let her go. And so he wouldn't sign the documents, and they had to remain in Paris. And I don't think her son's even been. I think when she travels to the US, she leaves him because he has to agree. And most of them won't agree because they don't think you're going to come back. So they get caught up with that. So definitely make sure that if you want to pursue a relationship in a country, that it's in a country that you could see yourself living in, and particularly if you think you might end up having kids, because if the relationship goes south, then you're stuck in that country. You can't really leave. Look, you could leave, the kid can't leave. So it's something people need to be cognizant of.
And that's what too many people people don't think it all the way through. They just think it's going to be a fairy tale, and it's like,
yeah, and sometimes it is, it's I know people who've been together, for decades, that are older, and, they met whatever person and they're still in, at least in Italy, I meet that because that's where I am. And they've been together forever, they have kids and they're happy. But I mean, relationships end sometimes. And so when that happens, if you have a kid, and you just need to know what the law is, and you probably will not be able to take your child out of that country without his consent, which he may or may not give.
Definitely. Let's do this one question here. We are coming to the end of our time. So if y'all have any questions for Latrese, you need to go ahead and put it in the box. I'm going to do our last kind of question, and then we're going to wrap it up. So get it in, everyone. We have okay. I didn't realize how limiting the US was until I started watching these types of videos. It's really exhausting. It feels like you have to subscribe to a notion that doesn't even align with you. I mean,
I think that's an interesting sentence to say, because you define your alignment. Like and where did that come from? Did it come from what you actually need to be happy, or what someone told you needed to be happy? Because when with Giacomo, he's Italian. His first language is Italian. I'm from the South Side of Chicago. My first language is English. Our lives are so different. But when we sit down and talk, we could talk for hours. He makes me laugh every single day. So even though we are completely very, very different, we get along so well. And it's so easy to spend time with him. So when you think about it, when people, because I kind of gleaning from this that something isn't aligning with you, because it doesn't seem like that was what people told you were supposed to do. And then I think a lot of times when I hear Black women say, oh, I only date Black American men, and they're great Black American men, but it's just not enough of them. It's all they say is like playing musical chairs, and somebody's not going to get a seat. A lot of people it's like 10 people going around in 3 chairs, 7 people are going to be standing. And so it's like, well, go just into a different room where there are plenty of chairs, like more comfortable chairs that would love for you to sit in them. Okay, that metaphor. But that's really what it comes down to. What is it that, what are you aligning with? Are you aligning with someone who's going to make you happy? Well, then look beyond what you think that could come as. And then when you look at living in Europe, it's definitely different. I almost hugged the clothes dryer because I missed it so much. But Europe is definitely different. But then, like my fiance is freaking out because we can't walk everywhere here. We could, where we live in Rome, everything we need on a daily basis is within a 10-minute walk. So, to me, that's better than, having to hop in a car and go everywhere. But then there's no clothes dryer. So you just have to pick your poison about what what makes you happy. And he's like, well, you don't need a clothes dryer because we have a bidet and your ass is clean. So,
Hey,
what do you need
that's
to be
true.
happy?
That's true. I just actually moved into a new apartment and I don't have a clothes dryer, but I have a dishwasher. And I'm like, I haven't even used it yet because I'm like, what is this life like? I don't even know.
But then, dishwashers, I think, are because of IKEA probably. They're a little more common. But the clothes dryers, that's like a hard road to hoe. And then when you have one, because the electrical system is so out, or at least in Italy, they're so outdated. It takes I say it's like drying clothes with an easy bake oven. You remember how the easy bake oven had the light bulb and it take 2 hours to bake a cake, this big. But then with the clothes dryer, it's taking 3 hours to dry your clothes with just a bunch of light bulbs.
That's the thing. And then with energy prices.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience.
Just put it outside. Okay, so as we wrap up, I would love for you to give us some advice for dating abroad. Because also in your episode, you talked about how you did feel like you didn't have the experience dating at first. And so you went out there and you did the reps, basically. You're like, I need to get the reps in so that I know who I am as I'm dating, but also what I'm really looking for. And so for perhaps anyone who's listening and watching who doesn't have that experience, or maybe they just have a bad taste in their mouth and they're just, how do you go about dating abroad? And I'm going to say even more specifically, for partnership, how do you, is it how you format your profile? Is it how you dress, your pictures? Is it how you present? How do you do this successfully?
Well, I this is a disclaimer. Hopefully this works for you. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. But no, I met Giacomo on Tinder. And I think one of the eHarmony doesn't work because men don't work like that. Men care about how you look. eHarmony is you have this great personality. Most men, it just is what it is. They don't care how how funny you are. If you don't look the way they want a woman to look, they're not going to like you. I like Tinder because you get that physical attraction thing out of the way right away, and then you just go from there. So I think women have a tendency sometimes to make their profile too sexy. It can't be that sexy. You need to be cute, playful, flirty. But if you're too sexy, then men are thinking I want to have sex with you, and don't like men who have really sexy profile pictures because they're just looking for sex. So, and honestly, my experience, if he's too attractive over the top, with the shirt off pictures and all that, he just wants to play. So I think the first thing is kind of to have a profile that is, a little bit of who you are. It tells them who you are. And what you're looking for. But don't be bitter. Don't be angry. Don't be like, oh, men are horrible and you better not be horrible. Just be like, hey, I'm this person and I'm looking for, something that could be just we can hang out and maybe just have some coffee or we could see what happens and just kind of leave it something like that. Something pretty generic, but leading. I think I would never message people first, especially when you're abroad. And there are women that disagree, but my belief is if a man can't take 2 seconds to say hi on a dating app, that is the lowest investment possible. If he can't do that, then what kind of boyfriend will he be? What kind of person will he be to date? Because he's already not trying to put forth any effort. So I would only respond to messages, never first messages. And of those, the ones that have the most kind of engaging things, I would never talk to anybody probably longer than a week without meeting them in person. You can have amazing chemistry with somebody and over the phone or virtually or whatever, but then you have to actually meet them. And there are people that I would have great chemistry with on the phone, but then actually we sit down and talk and I didn't like them or vice versa. I know a lot of women like to do dinner dates, and dinner dates are fine too. I actually started to like coffee dates just because if I didn't like somebody, I didn't want to invest a lot of time into getting to know somebody. So these are my two kind of things. So I have a Felice Weaver who does Black Girl Travel. She kind of has this, her theory is more that if you spend a lot of time talking to somebody over the phone and you vet them over the phone, and then when you meet, you have a nice dinner and he spends some decent money, which is solid because you spend a lot of time vetting him over the phone. But I still don't like to spend that much time on the phone because then if they, if they're cool over the phone, but then you're not physically attracted to them in person, it could be a problem. So what I like to do is, okay, we talk for a little bit. You seem relatively interesting. We'll meet for coffee. And I like coffee dates because every day I was taking my dog to the park. And so I would meet them in a coffee shop right in front of the park. So I didn't have to have my day go any different from how it would typically go. So it was like, to me, minimal investment. And then if it went great, then we could do something later. And if it didn't, then, I didn't lose anything, because it got to be like, so many men were asking me out. Going out to dinner is like a whole thing. And my time is valuable to me, more so than food. like I'd rather sit at home and watch Netflix than be on a date with somebody I'm not interested in. And so I wouldn't have to, do the hair and the makeup and find an outfit and put on some heels. I could just go to the park and keep it really low. I like daytime dates too, because no one's pressuring you for sex if they got to go to work or they got to get back to the office or whatever. They're just it keeps it really PG. When you have dinner with somebody, men are gonna men. And they're gonna, a lot of times they're gonna try to push to, take you to well, can I, come over? Can you come over? All that kind of stuff. No. So I actually got to really like the early dates, but this is in Europe. This isn't in the States, because in the States stuff is different. But in Europe, for me, it was fine. And then if it went well, then you have a real kind of date. So I actually enjoyed that. But at the same time, a lot can be said for doing the dinners as a first date too. And what she would say is, if you were in the middle of a dinner and it just sucked, she'd just get up and leave. so that's an option too. But I mean, it still was me wasting an outfit, doing my hair, doing makeup. Now I got to take a taxi back from the restaurant or whatever. So it just depends on what you're doing. But the biggest thing, the first step, is just putting yourself in that space. If you're a heavyset girl and you go to Ghana, a lot of men are going to be interested in you. They're probably going to stop you walking down the street. You're just going to meet a lot of different people. And so you'll have so many options that you got to be more strategic, just because you don't have time to date everybody. And that's really what it came down to in Italy. We used to joke because we could do 2 a days, where we could have a date for, lunch, and a date for dinner, and a date for coffee, and a date for dinner. It was just, it can get overwhelming so much. So you get so much attention. So then it's okay, who do I want to spend time with? But that's a good place to be in, as opposed to, I really want to go out with somebody. It's been 3 months. It's been 4 months. That, unless you just take your head and bury it in the sand, that is impossible if you're a Black woman living in most places in Europe. Now, other countries, again, Asia and Central America is a little bit different. But and even Africa, you will probably have a good dating experience in most of the countries there. But, it's more so than the United States. So you can be definitely strategic about it, and, just figure out what is the best use of my time and is the best way to kind of spend time with people that are interested in me.
I love that. We have one last comment from Doc Mari, who just she wanted to congratulate you. Your ring is beautiful.
Thank you.
Looking like an infinity stone. Okay. I love that.
Thank you.
I'm that.
Happy. We're happy.
Latrese, I could talk to you all day, because I think you have such great insight. And I think that your insight, one, comes from experience, and it comes from compassion. And I think sometimes in the dating space in general, people give out advice just from, I don't know from where, but also sometimes the advice can be demeaning and weird and strange.
Samuel, stop that. Don't listen to that dude. That dude is the worst. Don't listen to Black men tell you anything about just stop, because most of those men are coming from a place that's self-serving, either financially or I mean, they want Black women to date from a place that empowers Black men, not that empowers Black women. Don't listen to them, please. Listen to a self-help, or read The Secret again or something like that. But do not listen to Kevin Samuels or anybody around that. Just stop.
Exactly. Well, Latrese, we're waiting for you to write a book, put out some kind of program. Look, I know you're busy. You're planning a wedding. You got your whole business.
It's so much work.
If you're looking for another business to go into, dating abroad and coaching Black women dating abroad, that is a niche for you, and I can finally give people out of my DMs and give them to you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'm open to different things. I think the biggest thing with African American women, excuse me, honestly, is just kind of getting out of our own way and getting out of our head. The geography part is the easiest. I mean, it's really easy. But I mean, but changing that mindset of like what the young lady said before of, what did she say? Of seeing myself in a way other than, what was her wording, other than what I saw as being a line for myself or something like that. And I'm like, but who told you what was a line to you? Girl, you know, if you listening to your pastor and he probably sleeping with half the boys in the choir, like, don't listen to them. I mean, this is what it is, you know, because these patriarchal kind of constructs come from a place of keeping Black women in a space of servitude and unhappiness. Because if you're happy, then, you know, you're making a lot more kind of proactive decisions and a lot of more, so you're having a lot more self-determination. And a lot of these kind of narratives are meant to either blame Black women, like you're too this, you're too that, you're not enough this, lose some weight, gain some weight, get a BBL. No, honey, however you wake up in the morning, whatever look you have that you're happy with, there is a man in this world that will love you the way that you are in that space and be okay with it. And you need to find that dude. Don't fix you, fix your mind. And then you will find the person who can kind of complement where you are in your space. There's nothing wrong with us. Nothing. And stop letting people tell you that.
Yeah. I'm done. Latrese, you better write that book. You better write that book.
Yes, ma'am.
They need it. They need it and they want it. Thank you so much for taking the time, Latrese. We went over a little bit, so thank you so much for just being amenable to that. I really, really appreciate it. For everyone, if you want to hear Latrese's complete episode, I believe it's linked in the description below. You can also check out Dating Abroad Part 1 and Part 2. If you guys want more content like this, you have to let me know. If not, I'll just do whatever I want to do. So y'all have to let me know if that's what you want. Put it in the comments here now or on replay. And that is it. I want to thank you again, Latrese, for taking the time, being a wonderful guest. And for all of you that have tuned in, remember, it is not about moving abroad. And it is definitely not about just being abroad. It's about thriving abroad. So go abroad and cultivate a life well lived. See y'all next time. Bye.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of Flourish in the Foreign. So as you have probably noticed, this is the end of season 4. We're doing some throwbacks and things like that. I hope you're enjoying that as I take a little bit of a rest and as I prepare to bring you all brand new interviews by phenomenal, exceptional, incredible Black women for season 5. Season 5 will kick off in September, and I'm super excited to bring that to you all. But also, please remember that this is a solo indie podcast, which means that I am not a part of a network. And I am the producer, creator, host, editor, and everything of this podcast. So please be sure to support this podcast like y'all support Hulu, Disney Plus, and Netflix, and all those other things, because your support really makes an incredible difference in the production of this here podcast. Because y'all know, Flourish in the Foreign is a labor of love, but labor nonetheless. So please be sure to support the podcast. You can do so by going to buymeacoffee.com/flourishforeign and buying me a coffee, or purchasing some podcast equipment or software that actually helps make this podcast run. I'd appreciate that. Also, be sure to subscribe to the Flourish in the Foreign YouTube channel. Flourish in the Foreign, simple enough. Make sure you're following the podcast on Facebook and on Instagram at Flourish Foreign. And of course, check out all of the resources on the website, flourishintheforeign.com. We have new blog posts, we have show notes, and we have resources to help you move, live, and thrive abroad. That is how you can support this here podcast. And of course, be sure to write a review if you have not, and share the podcast with all of your friends, all of your family members, and the colleagues that you like. We'll keep it to the ones that you like today, but really you should share with everyone. And as always, big thanks to Zachary Higgs, who produced the music of this here podcast. Remember, it's not about moving abroad. It's not about being abroad. It's about flourishing abroad. So go abroad and cultivate a life well lived. See you next time.